The rain didn't fall that night. It attacked. It came in hard, slanting spears that turned the clearing into a blur of mud and silver grey. The pack loved nights like this, weather that made humans huddle inside and wolves feel alive. I was not a wolf. I was the one skidding at the back of the formation, boots slipping in the slick earth, lungs burning with every gasping breath, clutching a medical satchel that bounced against my hip with bruising force. The others moved like shadows between the trees, graceful, effortless, born for this. Their powerful forms cut through the storm as if the rain itself bent to their will. "Keep up, Rowena," someone threw over a shoulder. No warmth, just my name snapped like an order, like a reminder that I was always 3 steps behind, always struggling to match their pace. I dragged in a breath that tasted of wet earth and pine, pushed harder. My hair, red and stubborn and too bright for this dark world, stuck to my face in wet strands. My fingers were numb around the leather strap of the satchel, but I didn't let go. I was here because the Alpha King insisted every patrol carry a field medic, and because I was cheap, human, and expendable. They forgot sometimes that I listened. They called me Heart like I was a stray dog they'd almost decided to keep. They remembered that my mother had been the last human healer to serve the pack before she died of a fever 3 winters ago. They remembered her skill, the way she could stitch wounds that should have killed, brew tonics that pulled wolves back from the edge of death. They did not remember me. "Rowena Hart," they'd said after the funeral, glancing at each other with expressions that weighed my worth in seconds. Useful, barely. Mother used to laugh at that, when the pain was low and the nights were kind. "People mistake quiet for weakness," she'd tell me, reaching out to press my hand to her chest so I could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, even as sickness ate at her from within. But the ones who stand still in a storm see more than the ones who charge, and when they move, love, the whole world shifts. At 19, I'd rolled my eyes, thinking her fever dreams were making her philosophical. At 23, running behind wolves who'd happily leave me behind if I tripped, I understood. I stayed because someone had to care enough to stitch them back together when they forgot they weren't invincible. A howl cut through the rain, sharp and warning and wrong. The formation faltered, heads turned as one. I watched their bodies change in an instant, relaxed arrogance tightening into readiness. Ears pricked, nostrils flared. Even in human form, they could sense what I couldn't. Something in that sound that spoke of danger. "Eastern boundary," Griffin muttered, the scar along his jaw pulling tight. He was one of the king's personal guard, a man who'd survived 3 territory wars and wore the proof in raised white lines across his skin. Near the royal grove, every muscle in my body went cold. The royal grove was where the Alpha King's pups were kept on nights like this. Safe, guarded, always within range of the pack's main force. That howl wasn't pack. It carried something feral, hungry, something that wanted to tear and swallow and ruin. Lightning flashed, turning the world bone white for a heartbeat. I saw him then, the Alpha King in human form, a dark silhouette ahead, already beginning the change. His spine arched, the sound of bones cracking and reforming, echoing even through the rain. Fur poured over skin like spilled ink until a massive black wolf landed where a man had stood, paws hitting the earth with enough force to send mud spattering. Alaric Thorn, Alpha King of the Thorn Pack. Unbroken in 17 years of rule, untouchable in battle, a force of nature wrapped in fur and fury. He threw his head back and answered the howl with one of his own, a command that shook the rain itself, that vibrated in my chest like a second heartbeat. It was a sound that said, protect, that said, come, that said, anything that threatens mine will die screaming. Move! Someone shouted. Wolves surged forward, bodies ripping and re-knitting mid-stride. Clothes shredded and fell away, limbs elongated, teeth flashed white in the darkness. In seconds, the pack was gone, swallowed by the trees, leaving me alone with the echo of their passage and the pounding of my own terrified heart. I should have stayed. I could already hear my mother, rasping from some remembered fever dream, her fingers gripping mine with surprising strength. Courage isn't flinging yourself at death for the sake of glory, Rowena. It's what you do when someone smaller than you is about to be swallowed whole. A scream answered the thought. High, thin, child. I ran. Branches whipped my face, leaving stinging welts. Mud sucked at my boots with every step, trying to drag me down. My satchel slammed against my hip until the strap burned into my shoulder. But I didn't let go. I ran towards the sound because nobody else was near enough, and I could not stand the idea of another grave, another small body laid to rest because I'd been too afraid to move. I burst into the royal grove on a flash of lightning. The scene burned itself into me in a single, impossible image that would live behind my eyelids for the rest of my life, however long that might be. Two small figures pressed back against the roots of an ancient oak, twin pups in human skin. One dark-haired boy, maybe 5, with eyes wide and wild like a cornered animal. One girl with a riot of curls falling around her face and a torn dress, clutching his hand so tightly their knuckles were white. Their faces were streaked with rain and tears, mouths open in silent terror. Ocean and Bryony Thorn, the heirs, the future of the pack. But they weren't what froze my blood. It was the ring of steel around them. 4 crossbowmen stood in a half-circle, cloaks soaked through, hoods shadowing their faces. Their bows were drawn, bolts knocked and ready. I recognized the fletching on those bolts instantly, black and silver, feathered in the precise pattern of the royal guard. These were our own. Pack. Wolves sworn to protect the throne. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Please, Bryony sobbed, her voice hoarse from screaming. Please don't hurt us. Orders, one of the men said flatly, his voice empty of everything except cold purpose. His eyes never flickered, never showed a hint of remorse. No more heirs. No human binding treaties. The line ends tonight. He turned his bow slightly, adjusting his aim. The bolts, all 4 of them, lined up with tiny chests, with hearts that had barely begun to beat in this world, with lives that should have stretched ahead for decades. My body moved before my mind could scream. I slammed into the mud between them, arms flung wide, satchel tearing free and flying somewhere behind me. I heard one of the pups gasp as I knocked them flat, shoving them down with more force than I'd known I possessed, curling my spine over them like a shield, like a wall, like the only thing standing between them and oblivion. Down! I shouted, my voice raw and desperate. Cover your heads and don't move. 4 triggers snapped. 4 arrows sang through the rain. Impact was not a single event. It was a chain explosion, one after another, each bolt hitting with enough force to shatter bone. The first lodged high in my shoulder, a white-hot spike that stole my breath and sent stars exploding across my vision. I felt it punch through muscle and scrape against bone, the arrowhead embedding itself so deep I knew it had gone clean through. The second slammed into my lower back, sending lightning down my legs. My knees tried to buckle, tried to fold, but I locked every muscle and held. Beneath me, I could feel the pups, could feel their small bodies trembling, could hear Bryony's muffled sobs against the earth. The third and fourth buried themselves along my spine, one above the other, silver-tipped and slicked with wolfbane. The poison burned where it touched, spreading fire through my veins. My lungs forgot how to work. Every breath became a conscious act of will, dragging air through a throat that felt like it was closing. I couldn't scream. The pain was so big it didn't fit inside sound. Ocean's fingers fisted in my jacket, small and desperate. Bryony sobbed under my ribs, her face pressed into the mud, her body shaking so hard I thought she might break apart. I could feel their hearts like trapped birds against the earth, beating wild and terrified and alive. "Don't move," I managed, every word tasting of blood, of copper and salt and fear. "Do not move, do you hear me?" "You're bleeding," Ocean whispered, his voice shaking. I felt wetness spreading beneath me, warm against the cold rain, soaking into the earth. "Good," I said, though nothing was good, though everything was ending. "Means I'm still here." A howl ripped the grove apart. It wasn't like the others. This one was pure fury, pure promise of violence. It was the sound of a father who had seen his children lined up for execution, who had arrived seconds too late to prevent it, who would tear the world down to its bones in payment. Alaric hit the nearest traitor like a storm given teeth and claws. One moment he wasn't there. The next, a black wolf the size of a horse crashed into the man with devastating force. I heard the crunch of ribs breaking, heard the wet sound of a throat being torn out. The crossbow fell, bolt flying wide. More wolves followed, descending on the guard line with claws and teeth and righteous rage. I couldn't see much. My world had shrunk to the wet earth beneath my cheek, the arrows in my back radiating waves of agony, the tiny bodies pressed under me, and the metallic taste of my own mortality coating my tongue. One of the guards broke free and ran. I watched him through the blur, a splash of movement, a streak of cloak disappearing into the trees. Another wolf intercepted him before he'd gone 10 paces. The wolf shifted mid-leap, bones cracking and reforming, landing as a man with a blade already in hand. Griffin. I knew his stance, his scar, the way his jaw clenched when he was about to do something brutal and necessary. He didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. He drove steel through the traitor's chest with the precision of someone who'd done this before, who knew exactly where to aim to end a life quickly. "Rowena!" Griffin's voice broke on my name when he finally saw me, when his eyes tracked from the dead guards to the heap in the center of the grove, to me. Hands were on me then, trying to turn me, to lift me, to peel me away from the pups. I fought without meaning to, every instinct screaming to stay between them and danger. "No," I croaked, every muscle locking. "Not them. Check them first." "They're unharmed," Griffin swore, kneeling so low his forehead nearly touched the mud beside mine. His voice was thick with something I'd never heard from him before, something that sounded like anguish. "They're under you. They're breathing. Rowena, we have to get you out. We have to move you now." Something heavy slammed into the ground beside me, close enough that I felt the impact through the earth. A heartbeat later, fur retreated, bones cracked in reverse, and human fingers, warm and trembling, cupped my cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. "Who ordered this?" Alaric's voice was ragged and deadly, barely human despite the human form. "Who aimed royal bolts at my children?" "Your Majesty?" someone began, but another voice cut through. "Look at her," Issa whispered. The seer, ancient and knowing. "Look at where the arrows sit." I could feel eyes on my back, on the neat, horrible line of metal along my spine. 4 arrows. 4 perfect shots that should have killed 2 children. 4 wounds that had found me instead. One for each point, Issa breathed. Merciful gods. Alaric's thumb brushed mud from my lips, impossibly gentle from a man who'd just torn out a throat with his teeth. His eyes, storm grey and almost savage, locked with mine. In them I saw something breaking, something that had been holding together through sheer will and was finally coming undone. Why? He asked. And it wasn't a king's demand. It was a man's bewildered plea, the question of someone who couldn't understand what he was seeing. You're human. You could have run. You should have run. I tried to smile. I wasn't sure my face obeyed, wasn't sure anything was working the way it should anymore. But I tried, because he needed an answer, and I had one. Simple. True. They're small, I whispered through lips that felt numb and distant. Smaller than the arrows. His throat worked. Rain ran down his face, mixing with something that wasn't rain at all. Something that tracked clean lines through the mud and blood spattered across his skin. Hold, he told me. It was an order and a prayer and a plea all wrapped into one word. Rowena Hart, you hold. Do you hear me? You hold. The world narrowed to his voice, and the sound of the pups sobbing as they were pulled, finally, from beneath me. Ossian was screaming my name. Bryony was reaching back, her small hand grasping at air. Then even that slipped away. Sound fading to a distant hum, vision tunneling to a single point of grey that grew smaller and smaller. Darkness, when it came, was merciful. I didn't wake to white. I woke to sound. Crying. Soft, hiccuping sobs somewhere near my left ear. My name, whispered like a charm, like a prayer someone was afraid wouldn't be answered. Rowena? Please? I clawed my way up through the fog, consciousness returning in pieces. First touch, the softness of sheets beneath me instead of mud. Then smell, something clean and medicinal mixed with pine smoke. Then pain, a deep, constant ache wrapped in something heavy that made my limbs feel thick and slow. My eyes dragged open. The ceiling above me was carved wood, not stone. Intricate patterns of wolves and trees wound across dark beams. Candlelight flickered along familiar lines, casting dancing shadows. I'd only seen this room once before, from the doorway, when my mother was called to tend the Queen's birthing fever years ago. The Alpha King's private infirmary. Mother. The thought was enough to make everything drop back into place. The rain, the grove, the children, the arrows. I tried to move, and pain flared along my back, but it was duller than I remembered, wrapped in a heavy blanket of something that made everything feel distant. Don't, a calm voice said. You've been unconscious for 5 days. I've just gotten your spine to stop arguing with me. I turned my head carefully. Dr. Elowen Marsh sat beside my bed, dark curls pinned back in a practical knot, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands still stained faintly with old blood, despite what must have been repeated scrubbing. Her eyes were tired, shadowed with the kind of exhaustion that came from too many hours standing over an operating table. But they were also, shockingly, soft. 4 silver bolts, she said quietly, as if reciting facts would make them less terrible. Any one of them should have killed you. All 4. It's a miracle you're still here. Miracle? I rasped. My throat felt like sandpaper. Thought you didn't believe in those. I don't, Elowen replied, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Which is why I'm unnerved. The sobbing came again, closer now. I looked down. 2 small bodies were half curled against the side of my bed, heads pillowed on their arms, fingers threaded through the blanket as if afraid someone might steal it away. Their faces were blotchy and red-rimmed, tracks of dried tears marking their cheeks. Ossian and Bryony, eyes swollen from crying, small shoulders trembling. They wouldn't leave, Elowin said, her voice carrying something between exasperation and tenderness. I sedated them twice. They woke up and crawled back. Eventually, I gave up and just made sure they didn't pull out your IV lines. My chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with arrows. You're safe, I told them, the words scraping out of me. Bryony's head shot up. Fresh tears tracked down her cheeks, cutting clean lines through the exhaustion written on her young face. You're alive, she said, her voice breaking on the words. He said you might not. He said we had to be ready. He said, Hush, I murmured. If you cry that hard, you'll flood the room. Ocean scrubbed his face with the heel of his hand, trying to be brave and failing beautifully. We heard them, he whispered. They said they were going to kill us. You just put myself in the way, I finished. Seems I have a bad habit of that. The door opened. Alaric Thorne filled the doorway in a way no man should be able to. He looked wrong. Not in shape or size. Those were the same. Tall and powerful, with shoulders that carried the weight of leadership. But his expression was wrong. The Alpha King was precision and control, a man who never showed weakness, never cracked. The man standing there was frayed at the edges, like someone had dragged him through too many nights without sleep, and he'd forgotten how to put himself back together. Out, he said softly. Elowin arched a brow. Excuse me? Not you, he amended quickly. His eyes were on the pups. You two, bed. I promised Rowena I'd make sure you slept. We're not leaving her, Bryony said fiercely, gripping the blanket tighter, her small knuckles going white. Alaric's lips twitched, the ghost of something like pride crossing his face. You can come back after breakfast, he bargained, if Miss Marsh says she's strong enough. For now, I need to speak with her alone. Ocean hesitated, clearly torn between obedience to his father and the need to stay close to the person who'd kept him safe. Finally, he sighed like a tiny old man carrying the weight of the world. Fine, he muttered. He climbed onto the mattress with careful movements, leaned in, and pressed a quick, awkward kiss to my cheek. Thank you, he whispered against my skin. Bryony followed, wrapping both arms around my arm for a moment, holding on like she might drown if she let go. You're ours now, she said, her voice fierce despite the tears. You can't leave. Not ever. Then they were gone, shuffling out behind Elowin, their bare feet making soft padding sounds against the wooden floor, leaving me with the sound of my own uneven breathing and the man I'd nearly died for without ever really knowing. Alaric stepped closer. Up close, the exhaustion was worse. So were the shadows in his eyes, dark circles that spoke of nights spent awake, of worry that had carved itself into his features. His hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. His clothes were rumpled. We found the order, he said without preamble, no greeting, no gentle lead-in. Written, signed, hidden in the guards' barracks. My stomach dropped. Who? He held my gaze for a long, awful moment. My own uncle, he said. Lord Peregrine. Half the council knew he hated the idea of a treaty with the human settlements. None of us thought he'd try to erase my children to stop it. I swallowed. I'm sorry. You are lying in my bed with your spine rebuilt around weapons meant for my heirs, he said softly, each word carefully controlled. Don't apologize to me. Detachment would have been easier. A joke. Something to lighten the air, to make this less heavy. But my tongue felt useless, heavy with the weight of what I really wanted to ask. Did I started, then stopped. What? Did I make it worse? The words scraped coming out. If I hadn't moved, would you have reached them in time? Did I just add one more body to the pile for no reason? Alaric stared at me like I'd spoken another language, like the words didn't make sense in any context he could understand. Rowena Hart, he said, his voice low and shaking. You stood between 4 royal bolts and my children. You took every arrow and stayed. And you think you made it worse? I looked away, blinking against the burn in my eyes. He moved closer until his hand rested carefully on the mattress near my shoulder, not quite touching, as if afraid I might break. Issa says there's an old prophecy, he went on. One I thought was rubbish. When the line turns on its own blood, and the forest drinks royal silver, a human shield will rise, crowned in 4 wounds, and the throne will bind itself to her heart. I let out a breath that was almost a laugh. That sounds dramatic. So does everything about my life lately, he muttered. But the elders heard it. The pack heard it. The pups. His voice caught. They've already decided it's true. What do you mean? They call you our shield, he said, and our Rowena when they think I can't hear. He hesitated, something vulnerable crossing his face. They also asked Issa if they're allowed to call you mother. The word hit harder than any arrow. I'm not, I began. Yet, Alaric said quietly. Silence sat between us, heavy, trembling with everything unsaid. I don't know what any of this means, he admitted. For the treaty, for the pack, for you. I only know that the moment I saw you in that grove, bleeding for my children, something in me broke, and something else started to heal. My throat closed. You don't owe me anything, I managed, because it was the only thing I trusted myself to say. Not a place, not a title, not... He leaned in, just enough that I could see the faint gold ring around his pupils, the mark of his wolf. Rowena Hart, he said, you took 4 arrows meant for the crown. You gave my pups a future. You shattered a traitor's plan with your own body. The pack is already whispering a new name for you. I swallowed. What name? Lady of the Arrows, he said. The human queen who hasn't realized she's wearing a crown yet. Something hot slid down my temples. It took me a moment to realize they were my own tears. I'd given blood, bone, pain, and somehow in the middle of all that breaking, I'd stumbled into everything I thought I'd never have. A place, a purpose, a pair of pups who clung to me like I was the only safe thing in the world. Alaric reached out, finally, and with a hesitation that would have been laughable from anyone else, brushed one of those tears away with his thumb. I won't force you into anything, he said. Not a bond, not a throne. But know this, Rowena Hart, in this house, in this pack, in my heart, you are no longer expendable. The words broke something in me I hadn't known was still intact. I turned my face into his hand, and for the first time since my mother's funeral, let myself cry. Outside, somewhere in the corridor, I heard the soft patter of bare feet and Bryony's whisper, "Is she crying?" "Yes," Ocean answered, his voice wobbling. "Good," she said. "We can cry with her then." And for a little while, the Alpha's residence was full of quiet, shared tears, of grief, of relief, of something new being born in the space where arrows had once tried to end everything. The first week was learning how to sit up without screaming. Doctor. Elowyn had hands that were both gentle and merciless. She knew exactly how far to push before damage became permanent, and she walked that line with the precision of someone who'd spent decades rebuilding broken bodies. "Again," she said, supporting my shoulders as I tried to lever myself upright. Pain shot down my spine like lightning. I bit down on my lip hard enough to taste blood, but I didn't cry out. Ocean and Bryony were sitting in the corner, watching with wide eyes. I wouldn't give them nightmares by screaming. Good, Elowyn murmured. The arrow that went through your shoulder missed the major nerves by a hair's breadth. The one in your lower back, that was the dangerous one. Another inch to the left, and you'd never walk again. I managed to stay upright for 5 seconds before my arms gave out. Better than yesterday, Elowyn said, easing me back down. Tomorrow we'll try for 10. The arrows had been removed in emergency surgery while I was unconscious. Elowyn explained it clinically, detached from the horror of what she was describing. One had gone clean through muscle. Another had lodged against my kidney, close enough that removing it had been delicate work. The two along my spine had required a specialist from a neighbouring pack, someone who understood how silver and wolfbane interacted with human tissue. You should be dead, Elowyn said more than once. The wolfbane alone should have stopped your heart. Sorry to disappoint, I rasped. She smiled. Don't apologise. You're the most interesting patient I've had in years. Daily the pups came. They brought drawings, crude sketches of wolves and trees, and a figure with red hair standing between stick-figure children and stick-figure arrows. They brought flowers from the garden, wilting before they reached my room, but precious anyway. They brought stories, tales they'd heard from pack members about my mother, about her skill and kindness. Ocean read to me, struggling through words too big for his vocabulary, his finger tracing the lines. I helped when he got stuck, sounding out syllables together. His face would light up when he got one right, a grin splitting his serious expression. Bryony insisted on guarding me during naps. She'd curl up in the chair by the window, small arms crossed, watching the door like she expected traitors to burst through at any moment. I won't let anyone hurt you, she told me fiercely. I know, I said, because what else could I say to that kind of devotion? Gradually, they grew more comfortable touching me. At first, they'd hover nearby, afraid to get too close, as if I might shatter. Then Ocean held my hand, while Elowyn changed my bandages. Then Bryony leaned against my shoulder while Ocean read. Then they both climbed into bed with me, careful of my wounds, and fell asleep with their heads on my arms. The pack's behaviour changed too. Warriors who'd never looked at me twice now bowed when they passed my door. Low, respectful bows that made me deeply uncomfortable. I received gifts, weapons I didn't know how to use, furs soft as clouds, jewellery worked in silver and moonstone. Griffin visited personally. He stood at the foot of my bed, the scarred warrior who'd once told me to stay out of the way during training. And he looked at me like I was something sacred. Lady Hart, he said, and the title felt wrong in my mouth when I tried to protest. What you did? There aren't words. You gave us back our future. The pack owes you a debt we can never repay. I didn't do it for debt, I said. I know, he replied. That's why it matters. 2 weeks after I woke, Elowyn declared me strong enough to walk. Slowly, she warned, and only with support. Alaric was there within minutes, as if he'd been waiting for permission. He offered his arm, and I took it, grateful for the solid strength as I levered myself out of bed. My legs shook, the room tilted, but I stayed upright. Ready? He asked. I nodded. We walked through the pack house at a pace that would have embarrassed a tortoise. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated to avoid tearing the healing tissue in my back. But I was moving, vertical, alive. The pack house was different from what I remembered. Before, I'd haunted the edges, keeping to servants' corridors and back rooms. Now Alaric led me through the main halls, and everywhere we went, wolves stopped what they were doing to stare. "Lady of the Arrows," someone whispered. "She took 4, another murmured. 4 bolts meant for the heirs." A young wolf, barely more than a teenager, approached with trembling hands. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward my back. I looked at Alaric. He nodded. "The scars," he explained quietly. "They want to touch them. For luck. For courage." I turned, and the girl's fingers brushed the raised lines visible above my collar. She gasped softly. "Thank you," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "My little brother, he was there that night. You saved him too by saving the heirs." I didn't know what to say to that. More wolves approached. An elder with silver hair asked me to attend the next moon ceremony. A mother with a baby on her hip bowed so low I thought she'd fall. Children stared with open mouths, whispering about the human who'd fought arrows and won. We were almost back to my room when we encountered Isa. The seer was ancient, older than anyone I'd ever met. Her hair silver as starlight, her eyes the color of storm clouds. She moved with a cane, but with surprising grace, and when she looked at me, I felt seen in a way that was almost uncomfortable. "Lady Hart," she said, her voice carrying despite its softness. "May I?" She didn't wait for an answer. Her hand reached out, gnarled fingers touching my forehead. Her eyes closed. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she spoke. "4 wounds, 4 elements, 4 pillars of protection," she intoned. "Earth beneath your feet, water in your tears, fire in your heart, air in your voice. The arrows made you pack. What comes next will make you legend." She opened her eyes and smiled, a knowing thing that made me shiver. "The prophecy has teeth, girl," she said. "Don't run from them." Then she was gone, leaving me trembling against Alaric's side. "She does that," he said, almost apologetic. "Don't let it unnerve you." Too late. Back in my room, I collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Alaric helped me settle, adjusting pillows, pulling the blanket up. "The trial," he said quietly. "It's been scheduled, 3 days from now. Lord Peregrine will answer for what he did." My stomach tightened. "I have to testify. You're the primary witness." He sat on the edge of the bed. "I won't force you, but your word carries weight now. The pack will listen." "I'm not good at public speaking." "You're good at telling the truth," he said. "That's all we need." I looked at him. Really looked. The exhaustion was still there, but something else too. Something lighter. "You've been sleeping," I observed. He smiled, small and real. "The nightmares stopped. When I close my eyes, instead of seeing my children die, I see you covering them. It helps." "Alaric?" "I know," he said. "You don't think you're special. You don't think what you did matters beyond the moment. But it does, Rowena. It matters to me." His hand found mine on the blanket. This time he didn't pull away quickly. His thumb traced circles on my knuckles. A gesture so intimate it made my breath catch. "Whatever happens at the trial," he said, "you won't face it alone." The door burst open and Ossian and Bryony tumbled in, all energy and noise and chaos. "You walked," Bryony shouted. "Everyone's talking about it," Ossian added. "They said you walked through the whole house." "Slowly," I corrected. "Still counts," Bryony said, climbing onto the bed. She settled against my side with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged there. Ossian climbed up on the other side, more careful but no less determined. "Can we ask you something?" he said, his voice suddenly serious. "Always." He exchanged a glance with Bryony. Some silent sibling communication I couldn't decipher. Then he turned back to me. "Can we call you Mother?" he asked. The words came out formal, carefully prepared. "Not to replace who we lost. We remember her. But you're ours now. You kept us safe. You didn't leave. Everyone leaves, but you stayed." Bryony nodded. "You're ours," she repeated. "We want to call you what you are." My throat closed. I looked at Alaric, desperate for guidance, but he was watching the children with an expression I couldn't name. Wonder, pain, hope mixed together into something beautiful and terrible. "I'm not your mother," I said carefully because I needed them to understand. "I'm not her. I can't be." "But," Ocean prompted. "But I'm yours," I finished. "Always yours, whatever you need me to be." It wasn't the answer they'd asked for, but it was the truth. Bryony threw her arms around me. "That's yes," she declared. "That's yes in grown-up." Ocean laughed, the sound breaking something tense in the room. I looked up and found Alaric watching from the doorway. He'd moved at some point, giving us space, but his eyes never left us. The expression on his face was devastating. "You're good with them," he said quietly. "They're easy to love." "So are you." The words hung there, simple and impossible. Later, after the pups had been convinced to go to bed, after Elowyn had checked my bandages one last time, after the house had settled into quiet, Alaric came back. "The trial," I said before he could speak. "Tell me what to expect." He settled into the chair by my bed. "Lord Peregrine will be in chains. The council will preside. I'll present the evidence. You'll tell your story. Then the pack will vote on his fate." "What if they don't believe me?" "They will," he said with absolute certainty. "The pack knows truth when they hear it." "And his supporters?" "Will be revealed," he said grimly. "Anyone who stood with him in this will answer for it." I thought about that, about conspiracy and betrayal and the weight of justice. "I'm afraid," I admitted. "I know." He reached out, took my hand. "But you've already faced down 4 arrows. A courtroom will be easier." "Will it?" "No," he said honestly. "But you won't be alone." 3 days felt like forever and no time at all. I stood at the window the night before the trial, watching wolves move through the grounds below, preparing, setting up, transforming the great hall into something that could hold judgment. Bryony and Ossian pressed against my sides, warm and solid and real. "We'll be there," Ossian said. "Right beside you," Bryony added. I wrapped my arms around them. These children who'd claimed me as surely as I'd claimed them. "Then I'll be fine," I said, and almost believed it. The great hall had been transformed into something between a courtroom and a throne room. Long benches lined both sides, filled with pack members who'd come to witness justice. The Council of Elders sat at a raised table at the far end, 5 ancient wolves whose combined age exceeded 3 centuries. Candles burned in iron sconces, casting flickering shadows across stone walls. The air smelled of smoke and tension. Lord Peregrine stood in the centre, bound in silver chains that burned where they touched his skin. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair still dark despite his age. He looked like Alaric might in 20 years, same bone structure, same proud bearing. But where Alaric's eyes held warmth beneath the control, Peregrine's held only cold certainty. He was unrepentant. Alaric stood before the council in formal robes, the Alpha King in all his authority. But I could see the man beneath, the father who'd nearly lost everything, the leader betrayed by his own blood. "Lord Peregrine Thorne," the eldest council member began, her voice carrying despite its age. You stand accused of conspiracy to commit murder, of ordering the deaths of the royal heirs, of betraying pack law and blood bonds. How do you answer?" "Guilty," Peregrine said without hesitation. "And I'd do it again." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. "The treaty with the humans weakens us," he continued, his voice ringing out. "Mixing our blood with theirs creates abominations. My nephews are mistakes, products of a union that should never have been allowed. I acted to preserve pack purity, to save us from dilution." "They're children!" someone shouted from the benches. "They're half-bloods," Peregrine shot back. "And she," he turned toward where I stood at the back of the hall, "is human. What business does she have raising royal heirs? What right does she have to pack protection?" The hall erupted. Alaric's hand came down on the table like thunder. "Silence." The noise died. "Rowena Hart has more right to be here than you do," Alaric said, his voice deadly quiet. "She bled for this pack. What have you done except try to destroy it?" I hadn't wanted to enter with the pups, hadn't wanted them to see this, to hear the venom in their great-uncle's voice. But they'd insisted, small hands gripping mine, refusing to let go. Now Ossian stepped forward. He was 5 years old and tiny, but he walked toward the center of the hall with his shoulders back, his head high. A prince in everything but crown. "You're wrong," he said, his young voice carrying in the sudden silence. "She's braver than you'll ever be." Bryony followed her brother. "You're the mistake," she added. "She's our shield." Peregrine's lip curled. Children defending their pet human. How touching. "That's enough," the eldest council member said. "Lord Peregrine, you will address the council, not the heirs you tried to murder." She turned to me. "Rowena Hart, please come forward." My legs felt like water. Alaric's eyes found mine across the distance, steady and sure. I took a breath and walked forward, the pups flanking me like tiny guards. "Tell us what happened that night," the council member said gently. So I did. I told them about the rain, about falling behind, about the howl that came from the wrong direction. I described the grove, the way lightning had lit the scene. The 4 crossbowmen in Royal Guard uniforms. The children pressed against the oak, terrified and trapped. "They said it was orders," I continued, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "No more heirs, no human binding treaties. The line ends tonight." Those were the words. Exact. "And you moved between them and the arrows," the council member prompted. "They were small," I said simply. "The arrows were coming. I was bigger than them. It was simple." "There was nothing simple about taking 4 silver bolts," she replied. I hesitated, then remembered something, a detail I hadn't thought about in the chaos afterward. "One of the guards hesitated," I said. His hand shook before he fired. He whispered something. "Forgive me, I think. He didn't want to do it." The hall exploded into chaos again. Alaric was on his feet. "Which guard?" "I don't know his name," I said, "but he was the one on the far left, younger than the others, dark hair." Griffin, standing near the wall, suddenly moved. He grabbed a man from the benches, someone I recognized vaguely from the night of the attack. The guard who'd run, who Griffin had intercepted. "Speak," Griffin commanded. The guard was shaking. "He threatened my family," he said, the words tumbling out. "Lord Peregrine said if I didn't follow orders, he'd make sure my children disappeared. I didn't want to. I swear. I aimed wide. I tried—" "You still fired," Alaric said coldly. "Because I'm a coward," the guard whispered, "not because I believed." Peregrine laughed. "One weak link doesn't change anything. The rest followed willingly. They understood what needed to be done." "Who else?" the eldest council member demanded. Name them. The guard did. 3 more names. 3 pack members who'd stood with Peregrine. 3 who'd aimed at children and pulled triggers without hesitation. They were dragged forward, placed in chains beside Peregrine. This wasn't just murder, Alaric said. This was a coup, an attempt to change pack policy through violence, to end the treaty by ending the heirs who would have carried it forward. He turned to face the gathered pack. The treaty with the human settlements is about more than politics, he continued. It's about who we are, what we stand for. My mate was human. My children carry that blood, and that makes them no less wolf, no less worthy, no less mine. He gestured toward me. This woman, this human, took 4 arrows meant for them. She held when anyone else would have run. She asked about their safety before her own. She is pack in every way that matters. Pack isn't about species, I found myself saying, my voice stronger than I'd expected. It's about who you protect when the arrows fly. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. The words hung in the air. Then, slowly, someone began stamping their feet, the wolf way of showing agreement, of showing support. Others joined. Within seconds, the hall shook with the sound, hundreds of feet hitting stone in rhythm. Issa rose from her seat among the elders, her voice cut through the noise. The prophecy stands fulfilled, she declared. 4 arrows, 4 truths, courage to stand, sacrifice to shield, love to choose, choice to stay. The human who wore wounds like a crown has shown us what it means to be pack. The stamping grew louder. The eldest council member stood. Lord Peregrine Thorne, you are found guilty of treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and betrayal of blood bonds. The sentence is exile beyond packlands. You will be stripped of name, title, and protection. You have until dawn to leave our territory. After that, you are prey. For a wolf, exile was a death sentence. Cut off from pack bonds, from the strength that came from belonging, most didn't survive a month. Peregrine's face didn't change. I regret nothing. You'll have time to reconsider, Alaric said quietly. The other guards were given a choice. Renounce Peregrine and swear renewed loyalty, or join him in exile. Most chose to stay, dropping to their knees, pressing foreheads to stone in submission. The young guard who'd hesitated was given a chance to make amends, assigned to the outer patrols, where he could prove his loyalty through service. 2 others chose exile. They were led away in chains, following Peregrine into the darkness beyond pack protection. When they were gone, Alaric turned to face the pack. The treaty with the human settlements will proceed, he declared. We will not let fear or hatred guide our future. We will choose strength through unity, not purity through isolation. He walked toward me, and the hall fell silent. Rowena Hart, he said, his voice formal but his eyes warm. For service beyond measure, for sacrifice beyond price, for embodying the best of what it means to be pack, I grant you the position of Shield Guardian of the Royal House. An honor given to no human before, a position earned in blood and proven in courage. The pack roared approval. Ossian and Bryony rushed forward, throwing their arms around me. I caught them, held them close, their joy and relief washing over me in waves. Alaric's hand found mine. He pulled me close, the pups between us, creating a small circle of family in the center of the great hall. Will you stay? He asked quietly, meant only for me. Not as duty, but as choice. I looked at the pups, their faces turned up toward mine. I looked at the pack, hundreds of wolves who'd welcomed the girl they'd once dismissed. I looked at Alaric, the Alpha King, who'd let me see the man beneath the crown. I'm already home, I said. The hall erupted in celebration. 3 months later, I stood in the training yard with Griffin, learning to defend myself. Again, he said, patient despite my fumbling. I'd never be a fighter. My human body would never match wolf strength or speed. But I'd never be helpless again either. Griffin made sure of that, drilling me in defensive holds, in how to use an attacker's momentum against them, in where to strike to disable without killing. Better, he said when I finally managed to break his hold. You're learning. Afternoons I spent in the garden with Bryony, teaching her about healing herbs. My mother's knowledge lived on through me, and now through her. She had careful hands and a good memory, asking questions that showed real understanding. This one stops bleeding, she said, holding up yarrow. And this one? I asked, pointing to comfrey. Helps bones heal, she answered proudly. Evenings belonged to Ocean. We read together by firelight, working through books too advanced for his age, but that he insisted on tackling anyway. Sometimes we'd write our own stories, collaborating on tales of wolves and humans and the bridges between worlds. Nights belonged to Alaric and me. We'd walk the packlands together, his hand in mine, no longer alpha and human, but partners. We'd talk about everything and nothing, about the future of the treaty, about his fears for his children, about my lingering guilt over being so easily loved. You deserve this, he'd tell me. Stop questioning it. I'm working on it, I'd reply. The scars on my back had healed into raised lines that the pack medicine woman had marked with traditional tattoos. 4 arrows transformed into art, into a permanent reminder of what I'd survived and what it had given me. The pups called me Mira, their word. They'd explained seriously, meaning the one who stayed. Not mother, but something else. Something that was just ours. Tonight we stood on the hill overlooking the pack house, the 4 of us silhouetted against sunset. Alaric's arm around my waist, Ocean leaning against my side, Bryony holding my hand. A family forged not in blood, but in choice. Tell us the story again, Bryony asked. Which story? I replied, though I knew. The night you became ours, Ocean said. So I told it. The rain, the grove, the arrows, the moment I'd chosen to move instead of run. I told it without embellishment, without making myself into something I wasn't. Just the truth. When I finished, Bryony squeezed my hand. I'm glad you moved, she said. Me too, I replied. Alaric pulled me closer, pressed a kiss to my temple. Every day, he murmured against my skin. Every day, I'm grateful you moved. We stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in colours that had no names, watching the pack move through their evening routines below. Wolves in human form and wolves in fur, all moving together, all part of something bigger than themselves. Some crowns are made of gold. Mine was made of arrows and love, and I wore it with pride.